Vice Speaker. Where's the Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. 35th Guam Legislature is back from recess. Majority Leader, Vice Speaker Nelson, you are recognized.
Sudas Masi, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, just a point of order. We need to address the motion for adjournment.
We are on motions. If you'd like to make a motion.
Yes.
Thank you, Vice Speaker, Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam
Please.
Speaker. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn today's session, subject to the call of the Speaker.
On that motion, are there any objections? There's an objection. I'm going to call for the vote. All those in favor of adjourning today's session agenda, please signify by raising your hand to adjourn. 1, 2, 3, 4. Motion fails. Thank you. On the motion, anyone else wanting to make a motion? Senator PT.2, you are recognized.
Sudas Masi, Madam Speaker, thank you very much for allowing me to share my thoughts this afternoon. Madam Speaker, notwithstanding the House rules, I move to place Bill number 101-35 LS, an act to adopt rules and regulations for the game of chance pursuant to Public Law 35-4 on the session agenda.
On that motion, are there any objections? There has been an objection. All those who wish to put Bill 101-35 on the session agenda, please signify by raising your hand. Motion carries. Senator PT.2, I will recognize you again.
Madam Speaker, I move to go to the second reading file.
And would you like to discuss
Yes, ma'am.
on that
Yes,
motion?
Madam Speaker.
Point of order, Madam Speaker.
Senator Therese Terlahi, please state
I'd like
your
to
point of
know,
order.
this bill was reported out of committee? And is it reported out of committee?
I
as-
understand,
as
Senator,
was
on the
read?
point of order. You address it to the chair, please.
I am.
Okay, with that, I will ask clerk, has it been reported? Yes, and it is amended. Yes, it
Yes.
is.
Well, the amended bill that was reported out of committee was not the motion that was moved on the floor, Madam Speaker, and so I don't think that's in order.
Thank you, Senator Terlahi. On the motion, Senator Terlahi, as amended, can you help him with the motion, please? Senator PT.2, please.
Bill number 101-35 LS is amended by the Committee on Public Safety, Border Safety, Military and Veterans Affairs, Mayor's Council, Infrastructures, and Public Transit.
On that motion, is there an objection? There was no objection? There is an objection. All those in favor of the motion to put on the session agenda, please signify by raising your hand. 9, 10. Motion carries. On the motion to the second reading, Senator Pito, please.
Madam Speaker, thank you very much. I move to place Bill number 10135 LS,
As,
an act to,
as amended.
as amended, an act to adopt rules and regulations for the game of chance pursuant to Public Law 35-4 on the third reading file. And I would like to have a discussion on this one.
On the second or third reading? Clerk? That's fine. Please proceed.
Ladies and gentlemen, Manilu, Mananaho, the Toru Samduni Mangagi Gunan Ping Naani. Quatro biyahis tistan na bill di mapega gipiso. Humano zo pa Filipinas sa guatse noto za para be maregla di. Do faisin ye manyaluta. Kosina ma judo zo ma prepara esti zo ma ekungu ni manyaluta. Da pwede sina tanay sansa ejusia I man mamamaisin pumanagwaha esti na wego. Matsoni ko ni Mayor's Council ang napido. So gifan esti sa esta malilingo I tempo. Esti na inabio. Ahe tiu epo siya tauto po fan moto za para tatsonik za po fan gando. Esti nabio. Tapi papara tapega huzung para ejusia patanay oportunidad ejusia na tauto imalago. Mananaw guhin na wego. Taja esti nabio. Defectonda ni Paraguaho no po na dikta por wego. Edjo malagoy patana lamaulig patana guaha siya adilanto gi liberation ja po farmatu siya tao jo maatan jo ma lufno Inglaterra ma enjoy siya gini gi liberation. Eno fafasin imangatsongu para tanay sansa eji man malago. Pagusiti man malago tinisasari na fanugando. Guaha unsaina leng na pido. Spiafen impendo jon sonig este sa malago jo gumando. Kwanto tetinan esta. Taja malago pabe masangani minalago pabe masangani tay mano pabe usay sa lapeo antes de be matay. Pido, por favor, malago jo na benjoy jo sa tiutungo. Ti almamam tempoko ginigilutano nayu fansansa. Jesus Basi, Madam Speaker.
Buen provecho, Senator Terlahi. Anyone else wishing to speak? Senator Tello Taitigui, you're recognized on the main motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd like to call for just a 2-minute recess so we can review the bill.
I will allow that. We are in recess. The 35th Guam Legislature's back from recess. Senator Taitagui, when we left, when we recessed, we were with you. Did you want to yield?
Yes, I'd like to yield, Madam, and reserve my time.
Thank you. At this time, I have Senator Kelly Marsh Taitano. You are recognized. Anybody else wishing to speak before I have Senator Marsh Taitano? Anyone else wishing to speak? Okay, Senator Marsh Taitano, you are recognized on the main motion.
Sujus Maasi, Madam Speaker. I have several amendments to make. I'd like to begin with the first one.
Please proceed.
The first amendment is on line 9, page 8, to amend Exhibit A of the bill to read 5.1, participant, employee, restriction minimum age. No licensee shall permit any person under the age of 18 years to participate in any games of chance located and I need to correct here outside, so to strike out inside and place outside of the house of cards. This makes it consistent with where it's written elsewhere. In order to enter the house of cards, licensees shall ensure that all patrons are at least 21 years or older. Further, no person under the age of 21 shall be employed by the house of cards vendor or present in any manner within the house of cards. So again, this is to create that consistency all throughout the bill that within the house of cards, no one in any shape or manner should be inside the house of cards under the age of 21.
On that motion, are there any objections? No objections? Motion carries. Senator Marsh again.
Situas Masi, Madam Speaker. The next amendment is on line 2, page 11, to amend Exhibit A of the bill to read 5.1, participant, adding in employee. Restriction minimum age. No licensee shall permit any person under the age of 21 years to enter or participate in any games of chance within the house of cards. This shall include that no one under the age of 21 shall be employed by the house of cards vendor or present in any manner within the house of cards.
Thank you, Senator Taitano. On the motion, are there anyone wishing to speak? Any objections? No objections, motion carries. Senator Marsh Taitano, you are still recognized.
Situas Masi, Madam Speaker. This amendment is for line 7, page 4, to amend Exhibit A of the bill to read 2.1, procurement of vendors. Vendors shall be selected through a sealed bid process, with the successful bidders being both in good standing with the Department of Revenue and Taxation, DRT, and the highest bidders for each activity. For activities that allow for more than one vendor, the successful bidders shall also be in good standing with DRT and will be ranked in descending order and will be awarded in that order. No vendor may submit a bid whom does not participate in a pre-bid conference. All prospective bidders must include a police and court clearance. Bidders not in good standing with DRT at the time of the bid or during the Liberation Day Carnival will not be qualified to bid or participate as a vendor at the Liberation Day Carnival.
On that motion, no objections? Motion carries. Senator Marsh, I understand you still have another amendment?
This is
Please
my last
proceed.
amendment. I need to make a couple of adjustments, and I can have it retyped by my staff if needed and sent down. This is for line 16, page 5. And again, it's upholding that 21-year age limit. 2.5 Security Protocol. In order to ensure that no person under the age of 21 will be allowed to partake in the games of chance, and I need to add in inside the house of cards to make it consistent, and to minimize the exposure of persons under the age of 21 to these games, each vendor will be required to verify the age of each participant. No one under the age of 21 shall be employed by or present in any manner within the house of cards. Any government-issued identification, foreign or domestic, shall be sufficient for age verification. Further, the house of cards will be a completely enclosed area and access will be limited as further described in section 5.8.1 below. Additionally, plain-clothed security personnel may be present in any house of cards. If a person under the age of 21 is found within a house of cards at any time, the house of cards vendor shall, in the first instance, be issued a $1,000 penalty payable to the Guam treasurer. So I need to cross out Behavioral Health and Wellness Center there. With
Senator, if I may.
do you want me to have
just-
that?
No, what? Is
Okay.
this the new one's being circulated? Yes, please proceed, Senator Tyson.
Okay. Within 5 business days of the occurrence. In the second instance, the house of cards vendor shall be issued a $5,000 penalty payable to, and that should also say the Guam treasurer. In the third instance, the house of cards vendor shall be shut down and no longer able to operate during the Liberation Day Carnival and shall be prohibited from participating in future bids for the next 5 years.
On that motion, are there anyone wishing to speak on the motion? Senator Therese Terlahi and then Senator Taidegui. Senator Therese, you are recognized.
It's okay, Madam Speaker, thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Taidegui, did you want to speak on the main on this amendment? Senator Taidegui, put for vote, consigia and whatnot.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd like to proffer an amendment to the amendment. It's going to take me just a few minutes to have it typed up, but initially, it's the intent of these fines, if so happens that this vendor is fined or the vendors are fined. The intent was to go to the Guam Behavioral and Wellness. Understanding the process of funding, we know that it has to go into the Treasurer of Guam first, but we want to make sure that it's earmarked for that particular agency. So if you give me one minute, Madam Speaker, we're trying to write that amendment down.
I will have a moment recess.
Thank you.
This legislature's back from recess. Senator Tadegui,
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'm going to withdraw my amendment. We worked something out with the author of the original amendment. Thank you.
thank you, Senator Tadegui. Senator Marsh, you're recognized.
Sujus Masi, Madam Speaker. I wish to withdraw the amendment to line 16, page 5, and then I would like to propose to,
Reproffer the
yes,
one we just got.
reproffer the amendment.
On that, a motion to withdraw without any objection? Motion carries. Senator Marsh, I'm still with you on the new amendment.
Sujus Masi. So with the, with this amendment line 16, page 5, I put in a little bit of additional language.
If
To
you can, yeah.
To amend Exhibit A of the bill to read for Section 2.5 Security Protocol.
Please.
Should I read the entire amendment or just the parts that I?
Just the part that you.
Okay, good. So everything stays the same except for the last the last 4 lines. In those last 4 lines, the penalty is payable to the Treasurer of Guam within 5 business days. In the 3rd instance, the House of Cards vendor shall be shut down and no longer able to operate during the Liberation Day Carnival and shall be prohibited from participating in future bids for the next 5 years. Any and all revenues derived from such penalties shall be appropriated to Guam Behavior, Health and Wellness Center.
On that motion, Senator Tadegui, I will recognize you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, since this is a new amendment, I think it would only be correct if she did read from the top on down from 2.5, just for you know, if the body doesn't want to, that's fine with me. But just because it's a brand new amendment, it's been the prior amendment was taken off, and now we're looking at a brand new amendment. And for the sake of those who are listening, it might be important. So.
Senator Marsh, if you would like, you're more than welcome to read the amendment.
Okay, so for clarity's sake.
In order, yes.
2.5 Security Protocol. In order to ensure that no person under the age of 21 will be allowed to partake in the games of chance inside the House of Cards, and to minimize the exposure of persons under the age of 21 to these games, each vendor will be required to verify the age of each participant. No one under the age of 21 shall be employed by or present in any manner within the House of Cards. Any government-issued identification, foreign or domestic, shall be sufficient for age verification. Further, the House of Cards will be a completely enclosed area and access will be limited as further described in Section 5.8.1 below. Additionally, plain-clothed security personnel may be present in any House of Cards. If a person under the age of 21 is found within a House of Cards at any time, the House of Cards vendor shall, in the first instance, be issued a $1,000 penalty payable to the Treasurer of Guam within 5 business days of the occurrence. In the second instance, the House of Cards vendor shall be issued a $5,000 penalty payable to the Treasurer of Guam within 5 business days. In the third instance, the House of Cards vendor shall be shut down and no longer able to operate during the Liberation Day Carnival and shall be prohibited from participating in future bids for the next 5 years. Any and all revenues derived from such penalties shall be appropriated to Guam Behavior Health and Wellness Center.
On the motion, Are there any objections? No objections? Motion carries. Are there anyone else? Vice Speaker Nelson, if nobody else wants to speak, can you take the dais, please?
Madam Speaker, you're recognized.
Cedros Masi, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have two amendments, and I know that it has been passed out by our Sergeant of Arms. Thank you. And if I may start, the first amendment is to amend lines 14 through 19 on page 3 of Exhibit A of the bill to read 1.2, delete the games requiring skill and add carnival games. A carnival game played for entertainment in which the contestant actively participates. B, the outcome depends in a material degree upon the skill of the contestant. C, only merchandise prizes are awarded. D, the outcome is not in control of the operator. E, the wages are placed, the winners are determined, and a distribution of prizes or property is made in the presence of all persons placing wagers at such game. So this first amendment, Madam Speaker, if I may, is to make the rules and the regulations consistent with the terms set out in Public Law 35-4. That's the first amendment.
Cedros Masi, Madam Speaker. There has been an amendment. Anyone who would like to speak on the amendment? Senator Chalahi, you're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm just trying to go through the bill real quickly to find, because I know throughout the bill they did use this term, games requiring skill. And so yeah, I know it's used throughout the bill. I guess I would like more time to look through and see what, and I guess if I could ask the author if she was willing to yield, I guess I'm trying to figure out the meaning of the wagers are placed. The wagers, it just sounds like those games that we already listed under the games of chance.
Madam Speaker, would you like to yield to the point of inquiry?
Cedros Masi, Madam Speaker, for clarification, I wanted just to make sure to further clarify that these games requiring skills is carnival games and not anything else as it relates to gambling, but carnival games, which is the intent of the games of skill. So that's my answer.
We'll take a quick 2-minute recess. Senator Chalahi, you're recognized. Oh, forgive me. We are back from recess. Senator Chalahi, you're recognized. Okay. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on the motion? Speaker, you're welcome to close. On the motion, on the amendment. Say again?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Speaker. Just on the vote, I'm okay.
Okay. There has been an amendment proffered by Speaker Barnes. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. Are there any objections? I object. There has been an objection. All those in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2. For all those in favor for the amendment, please raise your hand. Amendment passes. Speaker Barnes, you are recognized.
Sidus Masi, Madam Speaker. And if I may call for a technical amendment where whatever changes need to be done, if we just give legal the opportunity, just based on the previous concern, to, so on a motion to give legal the technical, to make any changes where needed. The technical changes wherever needed. Okay?
Yes, yes, Madam Speaker. Is there any objection on the motion? There is no objection. Motion passes. Speaker Barnes, you are recognized.
Sidus Masi, Madam Speaker. My second amendment, Madam Speaker, is to add a new Section 2 to the bill to read. Section 2, the prohibition against gambling contained in Chapter 64 of Title 9 shall not apply to games of chance for the Guam Island Fair and Liberation Day Carnival authorized by this act. Madam Speaker, if I may, the second amendment is to ensure that there is no void or gap between the rules and regulations which authorize the games of chance on the one hand and the Guam law as codified in the GCA, the Guam Code annotated, which generally prohibits any gambling not specifically authorized in Chapter 64 of Title 9. And as explained, this second amendment will help eliminate potential ambiguity that the game of chance for the Guam Island Fair and the Liberation Day are not prohibited by Chapter 64, Title 9.
Sidus Masi, Madam Speaker. Anyone wishing to speak on the amendment? Senator Torres, you are recognized. Oh, okay. Senator Chalahi.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I object to this amendment. I know it sounds like a seemingly simple technical amendment, but that is exactly how we have licensed gaming machines while we have a prohibition in statute. And we are in the middle of a lawsuit right now that's been going on for at least 5 years because the Department of Revenue and Taxation licensed something pursuant to vague language, and the Attorney General has been fighting those licenses ever since. So I would object. I think the prior bill that the legislature passed already dictated what was going to occur at the carnival, and I don't want to touch the general prohibition against gambling that exists in our law, and I would like that to stand as is, because I don't want to, by accident or some other way, to influence that court case. And so I don't. If it's not necessary, and no one brought it up that it was necessary when we were passing that law back then, and I think then we should just leave the law as it is. Sidus Masi.
Thank you, Senator Chalahi. Senator Torres, you're recognized.
Madam Speaker, this is precisely what I was talking about the last time. I was talking about how awkward and inappropriate it was for us to promulgate rules and regs for an illegal activity on Guam per Guam law. And what we did was we basically took a section of the law that was repealed, and by the fact that it was repealed, it should have been erased from the Guam Code, but by some circumstance, the title was left on, so that left a loophole for us to act on promulgating rules and regs. What I had brought up before is the whole idea of how could this body promulgate rules and regs for an illegal activity, and in going through that exercise, we were in essence putting the cart before the bull. And notwithstanding my concerns, you know, the measure passed. So here we are now, and this is the aha moment, isn't it? This is the aha moment. This is what is going to precisely make gambling again legal at the carnivals, where in the law it was repealed. And the only thing that we did when we went through the last measure is we passed a law for the promulgation of rules and regs. So my suggestion is, and my position is, let's continue with what we did as a really backward, awkward, inappropriate measure, but we will have rules and regs, and we'll have games of chance at the Liberation Day. I object to this amendment. I look for an opportunity for the island of Guam to really decide if they in fact want gambling on Guam. By my recollection, based on prior initiatives, it was voted down. But you know, if we are at a point in our history where we're again going to take this subject up and have the island decide, or this body decide, that gambling is legal, then so be it. But I believe that in the spirit of the bill that we passed previously to allow us to promulgate rules and regs, it wasn't a bill to in fact legalize gambling on Guam or at the carnival specifically. So I think they're two separate issues. But you know, that's just my sentiment. I wasn't successful in convincing the body that we were doing it in a backward, awkward manner. It was a backdoor way to get gambling back on the books in Guam. But if that's the intention of the body, I've said my piece, and I think this will close a gap, but it wasn't what was intended when we went down that road with the initial bill. And I think that this is disingenuous to the spirit of what this body did before and what we are completing with now, agreeing to adopt the rules and regs. We set out to promulgate rules and regs. We are now looking to approve the rules and regs. Let's begin and end with that, because I think that that is exactly what we did. Legalizing gambling through this is a whole separate measure, and that can be taken up separately. But I think at this point, let's just stick to what we started. And I don't think that this gap is really a proper way as well. It should be done in a separate measure, separate and apart from promulgation of rules and regs. And that's just my sentiment. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Torres. Anyone else wishing to speak on the amendment? Senator Titlegy, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, first, I didn't take very well to the previous speaker saying that we did this in a backdoor manner. We followed a process. It was plain and simple. We had a bill that was introduced to allow this type of game of chance to be held at the Liberation for 60 days, Madam Speaker, 60 days only, so that we can generate some funding to pay for a 75th anniversary of the Guam Liberation Day. The bill passed, Madam Speaker. Now we're going through a second process where the bill required rules and regulations. And that's what we are here today doing. We went through the whole process, had a public hearing. I think we've had 3 public hearings, if I'm not mistaken. And even those who were against gambling actually came to the last public hearing making some comments that actually the time frame when there was a request to lessen the amount of time, that individual made a statement saying, well, let's give a little bit of leeway to these people who are vendors, who have the opportunity to bid on this. Nobody, Madam Speaker, who gets into business to lose money. And even they realized it. There were other great amendments made by another person who has been notorious for against gambling. She made amendments to the bill as well, and it was incorporated. But Madam Speaker, there is one issue that concerns everybody, and it's a loophole. And I mean concerns everybody who's going to bid for this. They want to comply to the law. They want to make sure they do everything by what is put in this rules and regulations and comply to it. But they want to be assured that they're not going to be put in jail or do anything illegal. That's why, Madam Speaker, this amendment is clear. And if you read it, at the end, authorized by this act, this particular act. Once 60 days is up, everything is washed away. No more game of chance allowed, nothing. But this protects the vendors, those who have that one concern. And I think it would be disingenuous of this legislature to make it uncomfortable for them or make them feel any type of fear that they may get in trouble or someone might sue them. So this amendment, I stand in full support, and it's for the duration of the 60 days. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Titlegy. Anyone else wishing to speak on the amendment? Vice Speaker Nelson, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, if I could just request a quick 2-minute recess. I'm looking over the current statute right now. And we all know that there are plenty of gaps in the current statute that allow gambling. So I'd like to see the impact. There's several provisions within the law that expresses this.
Okay, we'll
Thank you,
take
Madam
a
Speaker.
1-minute recess. Thank you. The legislature is back from recess. Vice Speaker Nelson, you are recognized.
Sujas Masi, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, when policy is being presented at the legislative body, it's always important to look at the history of the law, even the history of the bill itself. And so we have a history here. The history of this Rules and Regulations bill leads back to an original bill itself, which was Bill number 29-35. And in this bill, the very first bill, in the section 1, where it's the legislative findings and intent, in the second paragraph, it reads, "The intent of this legislation is not to authorize gambling, but rather to provide the Mayor's Council of Guam the opportunity to justify and establish rules and regulations for review to determine whether limited games of chance can once again be authorized at the Guam Island Fair, Liberation Day Carnival, or any other fair or carnival that the governor has issued a proclamation for." That's the original bill that was written. Then the bill gets amended. And the legislative findings and intent is no longer in the amended bill. So, version 2. In version 2, it states, "Notwithstanding any other provision of law, rule, or regulation to the contrary, the Mayor's Council of Guam, with the advice of the Attorney General of Guam and the Director of the Department of Revenue and Taxation, is hereby authorized to draft and submit to the Speaker of Legislature no later than 60 days from this enactment on rules and regulations to permit games of chance at the Guam Island Fair Liberation Day Carnival upon proclamation by Igmagahaga Guahan. For the purpose of rules and regulations authorized by the section, games of chance shall be limited to carnival games, poker, pasoy, baccarat, blackjack, monte, Carler game, big and small, betso, and bingo." And so, Madam Speaker, I'm bringing this up because now we're addressing an amendment that reads, "The prohibition against gambling contained in Chapter 64, Title 9, shall not apply to games of chance for the Guam Island Fair and Liberation Day Carnival authorized by this Act." So it's just very curious to see the evolution of policy, especially the policy that we are addressing today. This policy that we know historically that the people of Guam has said, we do not want gambling. And the evolution of this policy, first it states, it's not our intent to allow gambling on Guam. And then version 2 of the policy, the intent is completely deleted. So never mind about our intent anymore. Then the message is, we need money for the 75th Liberation Day Carnival. So the message changes. And then we forget what were we here and doing in the first place? Where's the history behind it? Now all we see in the front end is, we need the carnival to be successful. It's our 75th Liberation Day. We want to honor our Manamku. But then we forget what is funneling this. And many times we can get lost in translation. Many times we change the message, we change the strategy. It's a technique. Madam Speaker, I'd like to propose a point of inquiry to the original author of this bill. And my point of inquiry is was it the intent when he sponsored this legislation to allow gambling on Guam?
Senator Moylan, do you yield to the question?
I said to the bill, Madam Speaker. The point of inquiry is to the sponsor of Bill number 29-35. Is it his intent to allow gambling on Guam?
Thank you, Vice Speaker Nelson. Senator Moylan, do you yield to the inquiry?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yes, I yield to the inquiry. The question is, was it the intent of the author of the bill to allow gambling on Guam? The intent of the bill was to allow the games of chance to be brought back to the 29th Guam Island Fair Liberation Day Carnival, specifically for that purpose, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Moylan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I want to thank the sponsor for making that very clear, because he also wrote it in the original Bill 29-35. And we're going to keep on repeating this because we don't get lost, so we don't get lost in the message of these things. And it says, the intent of this legislation is not to authorize gambling, but rather to provide the MCOG the opportunity to justify and establish rules and regulations for review. Now, today, months pass. Today, we're looking at the rules and regulations that the mayors worked really hard to collaborate with the committee chair to produce something that is transparent, something that focuses on a revenue stream for the Liberation Day Carnival. And we're looking at a new amendment now where it says the prohibition against gambling contained in Chapter 64 of Title 9 shall not apply to games of chance for the Guam Island Fair and Liberation Day Carnival authorized by this act. Now, perhaps we may think it's something harmless. Perhaps we may think that, oh, they're only addressing Guam Island Fair, and they're only addressing the Liberation Day Carnival. But the key word is the prohibition against gambling, which means the stop to gambling, shall not apply to the games of chance for the Guam Island Fair and Liberation Day Carnival. Yes, it's the intent of the law, but this is the exact section, Chapter 64, Title 9, that they repealed last term unanimously, saying that we should not allow this type of activity at all. We are creating rules and regulations. Now we're saying we're not prohibiting gambling anymore. And perhaps it's a debatable issue. Everything is debatable. But there's always a winner and a loser when it's a debatable issue. And we cannot guarantee that whoever represents in the best interest of the people is going to win. It's a 50-50 chance of an argument. If we were to go to court and a casino wants to open up on Guam, and this perhaps opens a crack in the window for them to enter. And so I oppose this amendment. And if this is the case, the history of it, we're going through several court cases now. I say we bring in those lawyers and hear their opinion on this matter. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Situus Masi, Vice Speaker Nelson. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on the amendment? Senator PT.2, you are recognized.
Eko fana sigid man mumu patanagwaha esti for 60 days para na patanaya oportunidad ito para fangondo liberation. Dinansya si Jim. We're not asking for a permanent casino gambling on the island. We just want to give the opportunity for those people that wants to spend leisure time to go to the liberation and spend their money, and hopefully they can win. They qualify back and forth. When we had the election for casino gambling on Guam, there's people that voted for casino gambling in Guam. Not 100% of our people deny that. So we need to consider the lesser amount of people that wanted to have casino, but this is not. Purasti wegun Manelo amiste. Basta sige man managumento hita nita. Jangin timan malagom so penay miyon nejir oportunidad. The Mayor's Council don't want the 500,000 coming from GVB because you know why? That's coming out from the pockets of our people. So what they're trying to do is collect the 500,000 out of their own initiative to try to make it and pay the things that they need to pay. We got to understand that. Purita sigita gini man argumento. Jangiti man malagam jo, let's go for a vote. Jangiti man malaguit, tasangani Mayor's Council, ano duty itiringo mizu, hafa Enrico Bebinda. Call the Mayor's Council, tasangani. Forget about your work. Forget about your intention not to accept the 500,000 because it's coming from the pocket of our people. Sige na musto tubog, gini. Isigita man argumento. Why couldn't we just compromise and let's vote on it? If you want it, let's have it. If you don't want it, then for God's sake, let's not have it. Luman mama sini miora judo. And I ask Angel Sablan, what happens at the end when you don't have enough money to pay whatever you need to pay? When you come out with a deficit, what are you going to do? Are you going to go back to GVB and ask them for the 500,000 to supplement what you need to pay? Sige na itiningot pago. Nihim baby sa tadai, jiban malago man gandu, pagiti man malago. Muga man matu man gandu. But we want to have a 75th Liberation Day that is exciting for all of us. For the last 2 years, matay liberation amboy. Ti mega finasin ninday Mayors. Ti mega finasin ninday tau-tau ni malago manhano papa gui po tsagi swetin niya. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Or Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Terlahi.
Point of personal privilege, Madam Speaker.
Please state your point of personal privilege, Vice Speaker Nelson.
What I am presenting has nothing to do with a bill that was proposed to allocate 500,000 to GVB. What is being discussed here now is an amendment that was proffered that's saying that the prohibition against gambling contained in Chapter 64 of Title 9 shall not apply to games of chance, which essentially means there is your window to allow casino gambling on Guam. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Vice Speaker Nelson. Anyone else wishing to speak on the amendment? Senator Perez, then Senator San Agustin. Senator Perez, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I do agree with the previous speakers that this amendment goes too far. It goes beyond the intent of the original bill, which was to re-energize the Liberation Day Carnival. And what it does, in effect, it opens up gambling on a wider scale. And I think that discussion needs to be a separate discussion than what we have as an amendment. So I do object to this. Tsuzo's Masi.
Thank you, Senator Perez. Senator San Agustin, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, I just have a very simple question. I've been looking up Title 9, Chapters 64, and I was just trying to find the prohibition against gambling contained. We're talking about game of chance. It's very selective. So I was just trying to understand, if you look at Title 9, 64, I read everything about amusement machines, about everything else, but I don't see anything about game of chance. So I'm trying to understand how is that applicable to this bill. So that's my question, Madam Speaker, is I understand, I kind of like understand why we want to put this amendment in, but what gambling are we trying to prohibit? Prohibition against gambling contained in 64. My colleagues, look up chapter 64. I'm trying to find what we're discussing today, the game of chance. I couldn't find, I'm looking for game of chance. And if somebody could please direct me to the game of chance, because before my battery runs out, looking up the title, then I can agree to it. But I just want to make sure that we're speaking on the same language, because it's about a game of chance. They're asking for it. I'm in support of that. Let's do it. But let's not allow any other gambling. Maybe that's the word that should be put in. No other type of gambling should be allowed other than what is written on the rules. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator San Augustine. Did you need a recess for clarification?
I would just propose that maybe legal and the author of the amendment can show us all
Okay,
what are we talking about.
We'll
Thank you.
take a 1-minute recess. Thank you. The legislature is back in session. Anyone else wishing to speak on the amendment?
Madam Speaker, if I may, the good senator from Dedito Orjigo asked an inquiry in reference to the amendment. And if I just may, for the record, note that based on this amendment, it is only saying that this action will apply only as authorized by this act, based on Public Law 35-4. So this is the key language. It doesn't open any gambling. And if I can speak on the closing on the amendment motion, Madam Speaker, I could literally share some perspective on the history of the liberation on Guam.
Thank you, Speaker Munya Barnes. Anyone else wishing to speak on the amendment? Okay, we'll call. There were objections, so we will call for the vote. All those in favor of the amendment.
Madam Speaker, I raise a point of order. This amendment is Section 2. It adds a new Section 2 to the bill. The whole rest of the bill it's only Section 1, and it says these rules and regulations shall be adopted. And then it lists out pages and pages of rules and regulations. And so it was very clear to the public when they were testifying, and to all of us when we were reviewing this bill and suggesting amendments to it, that these were rules and regulations that we were affecting, that we were not creating new law here, and that we were not creating new authority here, and that we were strictly going to affect rules and regulations. And so I feel like this is a substantive measure that exceeds the original scope of the original bill, and it's bringing us the problems that I think, it's making it questionable what was the real intent of this bill in the first place. If it really was just to approve rules and regulations, then I think we should stick to the rules and regulations.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Terlahi. We'll call for the vote.
Madam Speaker, I rose a point of order. I feel that this amendment is out of order. It's materially different than the bill, Madam Speaker.
Okay, we'll take a 1-minute recess. Thank you. The legislature is back in session. I rule that the amendment is not materially different. Shall the body wish to overrule my ruling?
I challenge the chair.
All those who wish to overrule my decision, please do so by a show of hands. The challenge fails. Senator Titlegy, we're about to vote.
Thank you so much, Madam
Okay.
Speaker.
I'll call for a vote on the amendment. All those in favor of the Speaker Tina Munoz-Barnes amendment, please, all those in favor, please raise your hand. The amendment passes. We have a brief recess. Oh, I'm sorry. Speaker Tina Munoz-Barnes, you're still recognized.
Masi, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, maybe I just want to put into perspective as it relates to the rules and regulations and it having to come to this body for the legislature to amend, approve, or disapprove the rules and regulations as pursuant to Public Law 35-4. Maybe I wanted to share, Madam Speaker, a little history of how liberation came to play and how the stakeholders during that time have made it a point to acknowledge and have a liberation to honor those, to celebrate and commemorate liberation for the freedoms that they live today. And I want to note that in Public Law 1-15, Public Law 1, which was signed in 1951, there was this lady who everybody respected as a big community leader, and her name was Agatha Johnston, who convinced the U.S. military leaders on Guam to support a celebration to commemorate liberation on the island from the Japanese. And this celebration, Madam Speaker, continues. Leaders were talking about this celebration in a lot of when I was growing up was considered a game of skill and a game of chance. And those games have been around for more than 4 decades, those games of chance. And I just wanted to make sure that some of the history was brought up because it was a fair, it was a carnival, it was to make sure that we celebrate, and it was to bring all these people together. And for many decades, all these activities were happening. And today, Madam Speaker, we bring that celebration to the forefront, but we also bring a lot of the history. And then we also bring that the first queen, the Liberation Queen, did not come around until after the initiation, and if I'm not mistaken, it was Queen Paris. But I just want to say, Madam Speaker, that Liberation Carnival, Liberation festivities, Liberation celebration has been was first initiated to further celebrate and commemorate the freedoms we have today. And that was signed in July to further this carnival celebration and Liberation Day in 1951. So just thought I'd bring some history to that, Madam Speaker. Sizos Masi.
Sijus Masi.
Are there anyone else wishing to speak on the main motion? Senator Sabina, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have an amendment to offer. I think it's been passed around already. It should say it says line 31, page 8, but it should say line 10, page 14. Okay, the amendment
Page
reads...
4 or...
So there should be a correction on the copy that you have. It says line 31, page 8, but I believe the correction should be line 10, page 14.
Line 10, page 14. Please proceed.
Okay, so the amendment reads, it has been determined that the Department of Revenue and Taxation needs additional funding to meet compliance mandates set forth by Public Law 35-4 and the rules and regulations promulgated. Therefore, 10% of net proceeds shall go toward Department of Revenue and Taxation in a separate account set up to offset operational costs for this mandate. Should the 10% of net proceeds be insufficient to offset the costs incurred by Department of Revenue and Taxation in fulfilling the compliance mandate set forth by Public Law 35-4 to include but not limited to staffing, equipment, and overtime, the Mayor's Council of Guam shall be responsible for repaying the difference. So in our conversation with the Director Shimizu, the estimated cost is, I believe, $70,000, and that's just an estimate. And so that's above the 10% that's predicted to be received. So I think this would address that need.
Thank you, Senator Perez. Are there anyone wanting to speak on it? Is there an objection? Yes, Senator, you object or you, there's been an objection. Anyone else wishing to speak? Senator Torres, you are recognized.
If the proffer of the amendment will so yield, Madam Speaker.
Please state the question. Yes, thank you.
In looking at this, I wonder if it would be better placed, rather than going through this procedure of setting this up, an account and a percentage, would it be easier to instead just indicate DRT compliance officers, staffing, equipment, and overtime costs, and place that, for example, on page 13 under 8, determination of proceeds? If she was so yield, my question is, if we're going to allow for the recovery of these expenses, wouldn't it be easier to just place it as one of the line item types of cost of running the event in there, so that it could easily be deducted, as opposed to doing a whole another level of bureaucracy, so to speak?
Thank you, Senator Torres. Senator Perez, would you like to yield?
Thank you. I do see that now, and I do agree with that. It's better, it's more efficient to address it in that way, as a line item versus a separate account. So I would amend the amendment then in that case to, rather than, I guess, strike in a separate account.
We'll take a moment recess. Y Legislature and Guahan is back from recess. Senator Torres, you're still recognized.
My concerns have been adequately addressed with the proffer of the amendment, so I have no further questions or concerns.
Thank you, Senator Torres. Senator Jolson Augustine.
Madam Speaker, if my colleagues could all look at on page 14, I understand the intent of this amendment is to ensure the Department of Revenue and Taxation is properly funded. I'd only ask, or actually even proffer an amendment that instead of the mayors being responsible, it should be all parties that get a distribution of funds be responsible. If not, increase then the percentage from 10 to 20%, because the money is coming from one pot, and when you're only giving 45% to the mayors and 45% to the first gentleman, if you got a short, they both should share on the payment on the shortfall of the Department of Tax. And that's what I'm going to ask. Maybe the author would agree that it should be shared. If not, then I'll offer an amendment that it should be 20% instead of 10.
So, Senator San Augustine, would you like to work with the proffer of the amendment to incorporate it, or would you? We're back from recess. Senator Sabina.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to withdraw that initial amendment, and we're going to redraft that section.
Okay, thank you. On that motion, without any objection, motion carries. I'll go ahead and, Senator Sabina, I'll go ahead and recognize you. I understand you have another amendment.
Yes, I do. So the second amendment is for Section 2.1, Procurement of Vendors. So it's going to be a different line, but it's still page 4. The part that I would like to amend or actually add is, so there's 2 things that were added, but a former speaker already added part of it, but I'll just read the whole thing. So vendors shall be selected through a sealed bid process with the successful bidders being the highest bidders for each activity. For activities that allow for more than one vendor, the bidders will be ranked in descending order and will be awarded in that order. No vendor may submit a bid whom does not participate in a pre-bid conference. Okay, so we're going to strike that next sentence because it's already been addressed. And so I would like to add the last sentence, which is, the pre-bid conference will be publicly noticed and that all successful bidders will be publicly announced.
Thank you, Senator. And what I'll do is I'll take it on the first, I'll divide this amendment to delete that first sentence on the underline. All prospective bidders must include a police and court clearance because it's already been addressed. So we are deleting that on that motion. No.
Yeah, pretty much.
Ladies and gentlemen, as I understand it clearly, I want to just note that based on what the good senator, where's she from? The good senator from, where are you from? Barragata. She wants to take the amendment, all prospective bidders must include a police and court clearance, period. The pre-bid conference will be publicly noticed and that all successful bidders will be publicly announced. She wants to include that after a previous amendment that has been passed by the good senator from Nimitz. So, just so that we have that in order. So I just want to make sure that I'm reading that clearly from the good senator from Barragata. I'm reading that clearly that the amendment for page 4, line 10, that the inclusion, all prospective bidders must include a police and court clearance. The pre-bid conference will be publicly noticed and that all successful bidders will be publicly announced. Right?
Right. So we're not changing the language
Right.
of
I
all
underst-
prospective bidders must include a police and court clearance. That
Yes.
remains the same.
Yes.
What I'm adding or proposing to add is the pre-bid conference part.
Thank you. On that amendment, Senator Taigui, I will recognize you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have a question to the author of the
Please
amendment.
go ahead and state your question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, where it says the pre-bid conference will be publicly noticed, the question is, what is the definition? How long is it required for this notification? Where in law does it say, defines this notice?
Thank you, Senator Tadegui. Senator Paris, would you like to yield to that question?
So if we're going to go by procurement law, well, if you look at the original bill, it doesn't state any particular guidelines for that. So if you would like to provide some proposals or amendments for that.
Madam Speaker, I'm sorry, I was asking my colleagues. Can she please repeat that, please?
Thank you. Senator Paris, would you like to repeat that answer?
Yes. So the rules for games of chance, it doesn't state that. So if there's a proposal that could be addressed as far as the length of time required, or as far as the rules related to providing public notice. But normally it's written in the paper. There's at least some sort of publication that talks about open for bid, and it should be in an amount of time that let's see, it should the vendors should be given enough time to respond to create their own bids prior to the submission date.
Thank you. Senator Tadegui.
Madam Speaker, I have a concern about this, not being able to know exactly the requirements by law on publicly noticed. And it could be anything from 10 days to 5 days, and not really knowing what it is. I know that in the bid, the process of submitting a bid for this, that there are guidelines already in place. The notice is given out, the time frame on that. So with all due respect, Madam Speaker, I object to this amendment because it's already addressed in the process of bids.
Thank you, Senator. Anyone else on the Paris Amendment? Vice Speaker, you are recognized.
Just Masi, Madam Speaker, I rise in support of this amendment. We had some issues last year or last term when we were trying to get to the facts of things. How was the casino bidded out? Who was it bidded out to? Who was in charge of the operations of the casino? So what we received was a spreadsheet with Chinese writing, caricatures. And so I think that this allows for more transparency. If it's not going to hinder or harm the process, I believe that this amendment is not going to hinder or harm the process of accountability and transparency, which is why I support this amendment.
Sijus Masi. Anyone else on the amendment? If not, Senator Paris, would you like to close or call for the vote? I had asked Senator to close, but I know that Senator Therese raised up her hand after the fact. I will yield. Senator, Therese, I will recognize you. You are recognized on the amendment by Sabina.
Thank you, Madam
Senator
Speaker.
Sabina.
I stand in support of this amendment. I don't think that let's face it, the rules that we're looking at right now, they're not perfect. We don't have definitions for all the terms in there. Even some of the definitions that those people who testified at the public hearing asked for are not in here. And now we're going to, again, on the part where the public needs to get involved, notice of things, I think that we could be more clear, but the rules that we're looking at are not very clear. And I think what this amendment is going to do is make sure that the playing field is fair. That's what everybody wants. That's what everybody, worries about, I think, in the rush that we are in, is whether things are going to be fair for all the bidders, or is this predetermined? Or, who's really overseeing it? Are they going to comply with some uniform procedures? And uniform is what I think the general public perceives as fair. So I think that the requirement that a pre-bid conference, there's already a requirement that everybody attends a pre-bid conference if they want to bid. This just makes it very clear that we're going to give them notice of it so that we don't just invite a select few, and that we are going to give everyone notice of the pre-bid conference so that whoever wants to can be eligible to bid. Thank you very much. Madam
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Terlahi. Anyone else? I think I saw Senator Regine Biscoli. You are recognized.
Sidus Masi, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to a point of inquiry for the author of this amendment.
Please state your question, please.
My question is, the language speaks to prospective bidders, and that prospective bidders must include a police and court clearance. And I'm in favor of that, Madam Speaker, but my question is, what do we do if the prospective bidder or if the vendor happens to be an organization? Can the author of this amendment please clarify who would be responsible for providing this police and court clearance? I'm just unclear about that.
Sidus Masi, Senator Lee. Senator Paris, would you like to yield to the question? Senator Paris, I will recognize you to answer the question if you may.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. So my amendment was not in regards to the police clearance.
Senator Lee.
I apologize, Madam Speaker, I was looking at the wrong amendment, and I thank my colleagues so much for their kind appreciation.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? If not, Senator Paris, would you like to close or call for the vote?
Yes, so the source of this amendment was actually from one of the people that testified at the public hearing. So I think it's a very valid and important amendment to make to provide some clarity and fairness in the bidding process, especially when we're talking about revenue-generating ventures. I think it's important to provide fairness to our community, to ensure that those that are interested in bidding for this is given adequate amount of time to prepare their bids. And I think the more clarification that we can provide, the more transparency that we can provide, I think the stronger the process will be. Sidus Masi.
Buen provecho, Senator Paris. Do you have a point of order or point of...
Yes, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I withdraw my objection.
Thank you. On the motion, without any objections, are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. On the main motion, anyone else wishing to speak? I apologize, Senator Paris. I will still recognize you for one more. I do think you have one more amendment.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. The third amendment, actually I'm waiting for the first amendment to be fixed right now.
We'll go ahead and entertain the third amendment.
Third amendment, yes.
Yes,
thank
Senator,
you.
I apologize.
So the
Please
third,
proceed.
Thank you. The third amendment is also in the same section. It would add on line 6, page 4, it reads, procurement personnel should have already gone through the training specified in section 5141, chapter 5, title 5, Guam Code annotated. Again, this would also strengthen the procurement process in which we would place the responsibility of the procurement of these vendors in the hands of people that have already trained in our government, who can come from either of the agencies involved, whether it's the Attorney General's Office, Department of Revenue and Taxation, or the Mayor's Council of Guam.
Thank you, Senator Paris. Senator Tadigui, on the Paris amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the good senator from Barragata I know the intentions are well intended here, but with regards to procurement, Madam Speaker, procurement is a process when it applies to when you're buying something. That's when procurement comes into play. We are not buying anything here. This is, so, Madam Speaker, I respectfully have to object to this.
Senator Chadwick. Anyone else on the amendment? Senator Therese, I will recognize you. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I wanted to clarify something about this amendment. So it's trying to determine who is going to open these bids, who's going to determine whether they are compliant with the law in the first place. In other words, are these bidders even qualified? And then, of course, whose was the highest? So somebody's going to have to make that determination, but there's another part of the proposed rules and regulations on page 5 that refers to if minimum bid is not met, the Carnival Committee may consider a lower minimum bid and do a rebid process. And so all of a sudden there's a Carnival Committee that's acting. So I can see the need to clarify who's doing what in this bidding process because, and I'm not even clear, besides just our layman's use of the Carnival Committee that's been established for, I don't know if that's like a sub-entity of the mayors or if that's just part of the Liberation Festivity Committee or, but anyways, so procurement personnel, I mean, it helps to do that, but I think it might actually not go far enough. We need to be very clear who's doing this bidding process, who's conducting it. The way the mayors spoke at the public hearing, I was guessing they were going to do all of this, but maybe really it's not been clarified because now that I'm looking at that and I'm trying to, I don't know, maybe we need a recess just to make sure that we're not inconsistent of who's taking care of the bids, who's opening them, and who's determining these things. Otherwise, that's a good part of this amendment, but I don't know. I'm afraid that it's not going far enough, Madam Speaker, and we need clarification. So I would ask for a 1-minute recess.
I will entertain Senator Chadwick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I call for the vote.
Madam Speaker, I would ask then that if we're not going to clarify these things, then I would ask that the sponsor yield.
Senator, if you allow me to give you some information, it has been an executive committee comprised of the agencies from the department, including the Mayor's Council, including the military personnel. The majority, some nonprofit organizations, have all been included in the committee for the liberation festivities, if that is your question.
No, that's what I was suggesting, that we have a liberation festivity, a liberation committee, but is that the same as what's referred to in these rules and regulations, the Carnival Committee? I don't think so. And that's why I'm asking, is this perhaps a sub-entity of the mayors? And if that's the case...
Senator, if I may, the Mayor's Council is chairing that component of the festivities.
What component? Which component?
The Carnival. They're part
Yes.
of the committee chairmanship, yes.
Yes, I know they belong on your committee, right?
It
The
is-
Liberation Committee.
It is the government.
Yes,
It
of
is-
course, yes. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're trying to figure out who's opening the bids, and I don't think it's the Liberation Festivities Committee. And in the rules, I'm pointing out on page 5, line 5, it says a carnival committee does all these things. And so I guess I'm trying to, if we know who this is, it might help us to figure out whether we support this amendment or not, because she's saying procurement personnel. And so those two
Would the
have to
author
be
of the
read
amendment,
together.
thank you, Senator. Would the author of the amendment yield?
No, I think I need the sponsor of the bill to yield, Madam Speaker. If I may ask that the sponsor of the bill yield to the question of who is the carnival committee that's listed on page 5. It's not defined. And I don't really see that referred to anywhere else. The mayor's council is specifically named in other places of the bill. I'm suspecting that they intend to be the ones to do this, that they think it's them, the mayors.
That is the Public Law 35-4, Senator Therese. Yes. So that is the answer. If it doesn't meet yours, I can understand you can object. I do apologize. The answer is, it is the Mayor's Council. And based on Public Law 35-4, it comes back to this body to promulgate based on the rules and regs as submitted with the stakeholders, signed by the Department of Revenue and Taxation, the Attorney General's Office, and the Mayor's Council of Guam. Those were the parties, as authorized and signed, submitted the rules and regulations back to this legislature.
Those parties submitted the rules and regulations. Right.
Yes, Senator.
Right, but we're on an amendment right now that's determining who's going to open up the bids and who's going to put out the
Senator, that
notice
is
for the bid, for
the
the pre-procurement, pre-bid conference.
Senator, I'm answering that question.
Yes.
It's the mayor's.
Well,
So
thank you for your
asking-
answer, Madam
Thank you.
Speaker. So I'm still speaking on the amendment now, and I'm saying that the amendment is good because it's trying to clarify something that is not clear in these rules and regs, and that is, who is this carnival committee? What's the difference between that in our rules and regulations and all references that otherwise say Mayor's Council of Guam? And so who really exactly is opening the bids? So the sponsor of this amendment has suggested that any procurement personnel from the Department of Revenue and Taxation, the Mayor's Council of Guam, and she said one other, that any of those can do this.
The Attorney General of Guam, Senator
Attorney-
Chalahi, as noted.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that any of those, and I'm
That's
if I understand, so that I understand, and that's why I say this is a good amendment, that we clarify who that is going to be.
I
And
will
I'm
take
just
a moment's
wondering if that
recess.
conflicts
Yes.
with
Thank you.
what
I'll
the
take a
Carnival
moment's recess.
Committee's doing on page 5. Are you cutting me off?